Hey guys, I'm the Comics Kid 2099, and I'm here to talk about something, not review anything. I'm just here chatting with you guys. I mentioned this last week. I reviewed the first hardcover volume of Rob Liefeld and Fabian Nicesia's X-Force. I think it was called Force to be Reckoned with. I talked about this a little bit in that video, and I wanted to go ahead and do an entire video on this. And this is something that has been in my mind for a long time now. I've kind of felt this way for a while, and I just never thought to do a video on it on this channel. I want to talk about how, in my opinion, Rob Liefeld has kind of gotten the short end of the stick as far as the internet is concerned. You cannot throw a rock on the internet without hitting somebody who thinks that Rob Liefeld is the worst comic book artist ever. And I want to go ahead and say, I am going to be defending Rob Liefeld's art. No, let me not say it that way. It's not that I'm defending Liefeld. It's that I'm going to be bringing others down to his level. I do think that Liefeld is a pretty bad artist. I don't think that he's good. I think if you go back to the mid to late 80s, like 88 probably is when he got the Hawk and Dove job. I think that was one of his first jobs. If you read that, it's not terrible. He had potential to be a really good artist. And then if you look at the, he did one issue of Uncanny X-Men, it's not astoundingly bad. Now, he wasn't just a superb artist, but he wasn't as awful then as he is today. I think what probably happened with Liefeld was somebody told him, hey, this is really good. And then he let it go to his head, and he figured that he didn't have to work harder to improve his art because somebody out there said that what he was doing was already pretty good, and if anything, his art got worse over the years. But having said that, do I agree with the sentiment that seemingly everyone else agrees with, that Liefeld is the worst artist out there? I'm going to say no. I think there's a lot of artists out there who are as bad as Liefeld, but for some reason nobody ever picks on those guys. If you look at the main guys who all went and founded Image Comics in the early 90s, there was, let me see if I can get this right without looking it up, Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, Eric Larson, I don't remember the other two. The guy who did Shadowhawk, Jim Valentino, and there was one more guy whose name might have been Mark Silvestri. He might have been the sixth guy. Most of those guys, their art, not extremely good. Now, I think Jim Valentino is probably the best one out of the group. I think if you go back and look at his Guardians of the Galaxy stuff, his art is very good. It looks like it could pass today. I think that some of those guys, though, in fact, most of them, I think if you look at those artists without knowing who the artist was, you would say that's some really awful artwork. For example, Todd McFarlane. I have never understood how people can praise McFarlane's art on the early 90s Spider-Man and the early Spawn issues, how they can say that this is some really stylistic artwork and it's really good, and then in the same breath they can say that Rob Liefeld is really bad. Both of them have no idea how the human body works. If you look at Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man, where he's got his legs up behind his neck, and it looks like Spider-Man literally does not have a skeletal structure in his body, that's what Todd McFarlane is doing. And then, like, I've read one issue of Spawn, only one issue, and that was enough for me. And Todd McFarlane does not know how to draw human beings. He's got facial expressions that are really weird and disgusting, and they will change from panel to panel, like, not that the character's expression is changing, but like the character's face is actually morphing and transforming. And Todd McFarlane is not a good artist, but somehow karma worked out so that McFarlane was getting all this praise. Like, at one time, I'm pretty sure people considered him to be one of the best artists in the industry, and he's as bad as Liefeld. Now, these days, McFarlane has kind of, I don't want to say he's wised up, but he kind of let other people take hold of his franchise. He was letting other artists draw it pretty quickly. Like, I would say within the first 5 years of Spawn, there were other artists drawing the title. Now, I don't remember when it was that McFarlane was letting other people write the title. But after a while, it got to where McFarlane kind of realized that his strong suit was not drawing, and that he was better off just kind of basically being an editor-in-chief on his own title and letting other people do stuff with his character and with his comic. And, that's fine, because Rob Liefeld, if anything, he continues to bring it on himself. I personally think if he was to do the same thing that McFarlane did and take all of his creations that he did at Image Comics and let other people have their way with those creations, he would have a much better chance. I don't want to say a better chance at success, but I think people would stop picking on him as much. I think, for one, he'd probably be raking in a lot more money, because I, for one, really loved Prophet. I don't want to say it was a reboot. It was kind of sort of a soft reboot of the character from the 90s who appeared in Young Blood, and then it was sort of a sequel, sort of a reboot. There was also Glory, which I haven't read, but I've heard good things. If he was to let other creators do that with all of his characters, like Supreme, Young Blood, every single one of them, I think Bloodbath or something like that, Bloodstrike, if he was to let people do that with like the way that they did on Prophet and Glory, I think Liefeld would have a nice little sub-company all of his own, and I think that people would stop giving him as hard of a time. I think part of the reason that people continue to give him a hard time is because he continues to draw. When the New 52 came out, I was absolutely baffled that Rob Liefeld was one of the artists that I guess DC Editorial had picked to write and draw like 3 of their titles. Now, like I said, I still don't think that Liefeld is the worst artist ever, but I do think a lot of the perpetual hatred that the internet is generating comes from he keeps doing stuff. Like, all throughout the 2000s and on up until today, he's still drawing stuff. And I think if he was to stop drawing and maybe become more of an idea man and kind of an editor for other people handling his characters, I think that a lot of the Rob Liefeld hatred would stop. Some other artists that I think are as bad as Liefeld, like I said, I think Jim Valentino, out of all the guys who founded Image, he was the best one. I haven't read a lot of his Shadowhawk stuff, but I really did like what he did on Guardians of the Galaxy shortly before he left Image. And then you have Mark Silvestri. I've never liked Mark Silvestri's work. It's very sketchy. Like, there's a lot of just scribbly lines that make up a figure on the page, and I've never really cared for his style. I've never liked Jim Lee, either as a person. Everything I've heard about him as a human being, he sounds like a scumbag, and also as an artist, I've never really liked his style. You look at some of Jim Lee's Wildcats from the same time as Liefeld's Youngblood. A lot of people like to make fun of Liefeld for drawing these characters who have ridiculously anatomically impossible characters with like really big muscles, like women who I'm not even going to describe it because I try to aspire to be a family channel. Just go and Google like Youngblood and look at some of the females on the covers of those comics. Those covers are just as bad as the covers that Jim Lee did for Wildcats. You have the character Zealot, who is just as bad as like the character Vogue on Young Blood. Like, neither one of them are drawn very good. And Jim Lee, he has improved over the years, but he's still not doing great art, I don't think. A lot of people really like his work on, say, Hush, that he drew the Hush miniseries that Jeff Loeb wrote, and of course that was like 10 years ago. But he was better on Hush than he was on like Wildcats, but I still don't think that that was very good artwork. I still think he's doing that same Image style. And then you have people who have kind of, this style has been passed on to them. One guy, Michael Turner, who is, he's dead now. I hate to speak ill of the dead, but I never really liked his style. It was very similar to Jim Lee and Mark Silvestri. Ed Beans is another guy. Never liked his style. Very similar to Mark Silvestri and Jim Lee. And then you have Eric Larson, who, this one's a mixed bag for me, because I have read roughly, I think, the first 50 issues of The Savage Dragon, and I enjoyed it, but that was like, 7 years ago. That was a long time ago when I read all that. I enjoyed the stories. I really thought that the stories he was coming up with in that series, and this was around the same time that Liefeld was doing Young Blood and Jim Lee was doing Wildcats, I thought the stories were very entertaining and very enjoyable, but the artwork still wasn't very good. You have people who are whining and crying about Liefeld who doesn't know how the human body works, and then Eric Larson draws a character who is like literally as big as a tank and has muscles that are like muscles on an arm that are as big as a normal human being should be from shoulder to shoulder. And like Eric Larson doesn't get the hatred that Rob Liefeld does, and Mark Silvestri doesn't get the hatred that Rob Liefeld does. And honestly, this is something that has always bothered me. Now, I want to reiterate, I am not saying that Liefeld is a good artist. I think he's a pretty bad artist. I just don't think that he is the absolute worst. I think that you could easily make a case for there being an 8-way tie of artists being the absolute worst. I think a lot of the guys I've mentioned in this video, in fact, all of them I would say, they're all about that bad. I don't really think any of them I would ever consider to be good artists. Now, some of them are good at other things. For example, McFarlane, who's a guy who, personally, I don't really like him from everything that I've heard, but he seemed to get the right idea. This is what I'm good at, so this is what I'm going to do. Managing his characters and kind of starting up his own company is something that he's really good at. Much better at that than he is at drawing. And then Eric Larson, who I think is like the editor-in-chief of Image Comics now, he's better at that than he is at drawing. And I think he still writes Savage Dragon whenever it comes out, so he was decent at writing, from what I remember. Maybe if I went back and read that, I wouldn't like it as much. I don't know. And I think part of the reason that Liefeld gets such a bad rap is that he hasn't yet found that niche that he's really good at. Because drawing is definitely not it. And he continues to draw. He was drawing Grifter, I think. He was drawing Deathstroke. He was drawing Hawk and Dove. He was writing the Savage Hawkman, but I don't think he was drawing it. I don't remember. But, yeah, that's my topic video. I am absolutely certain that people are going to disagree with me here. Just the fact that it appears that I'm sort of defending Rob Liefeld is going to get this video lots of thumbs down, but that's okay. I just wanted to throw my opinion out there. If you don't happen to hate me after this video, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you agree with me? If you disagree with me, tell me why. Why do you think that Liefeld is so much worse than Todd McFarlane or Mark Silvestri? Let me know what you guys think. And I will be back tomorrow with a review of an episode of Batman the Animated Series, and then I've got at least one review in store for you guys next week. So I will see you guys then. Have a great day.